"Hey, lost little girl, Halloween's over." Blake's voice cut through the high-end gun shop. Sergeant Kaylin Vance, 24, stood silently in her combat uniform. "She's probably playing dress-up," a customer sneered. Blake stepped forward, mocking her. "This place is for serious shooters, not for kids." What they didn't know was that this young woman was the most elite Force Recon marksman, and they were about to make the final mistake of their lives. A crisp autumn wind swept through the streets of Denver, carrying the scent of distant rain and the first hint of winter's chill. It rattled the large plate glass window of Valor Arms and Tactical, a high-end firearms boutique nestled in the city's affluent Cherry Creek district. Inside, the air was still and warm, thick with the smell of gun oil, polished wood, and old leather. A reverent silence, typical of such establishments, was broken only by the hushed murmurs of wealthy collectors. That silence shattered when the bell above the door chimed. Sergeant Kaylin Vance stood framed in the doorway, a stark figure of disciplined purpose against the boutique's luxurious backdrop. At 24, she possessed a sharp classical beauty with smooth pale skin and intense emerald green eyes. Her jet black hair was pulled back into a severe regulation bun, not a single strand out of place. She wore the Marine Corps' digital Marpat combat uniform, its intricate pattern of pixels faded slightly from use, not from a factory. It fit her toned, athletic frame perfectly, a second skin forged in hardship. Blake, the sales associate behind the gleaming counter, was a young man in his late 20s who wore his company polo shirt like a suit of armor. His hair was meticulously styled, and his smile was a practiced, condescending curve. He saw Kaylin not as a professional, but as an intrusion. "Oh, look what we have here," he announced loudly, playing to the small audience of older men in expensive hunting jackets. "Must be a soldier's girlfriend, here to pick up a surprise gift. Let me guess, you want a pink pistol with rhinestone grips?" Kaylin ignored him, her gaze sweeping the room in a practiced, methodical arc. She wasn't shopping, she was assessing. The voice of Colonel Thorne, calm and tense, echoed in her covert earpiece. "The package is in the main display case. You have 30 minutes, Kaylin." Every second wasted on this arrogant clerk was a second closer to failure. Her eyes locked onto a man standing near a rifle rack. His name was Silas. He appeared to be in his late 40s, dressed in a tailored Italian blazer that cost more than her monthly salary. He had the distinguished look of a seasoned collector, but his posture was too relaxed, his awareness of his surroundings too acute. He was a predator, and his presence here was no coincidence. As Kaylin approached the main counter, Silas turned, feigning a sudden interest in a nearby display, and brushed against her shoulder. It was a subtle, deliberate test of her balance and reaction. A civilian would have stumbled. Kaylin's core muscles tightened instinctively. She stood firm as a rock, absorbing the impact without a flinch. Silas's lips twitched into the barest hint of a smirk. He had his answer. "I'm here to acquire the Nighthawk Custom, Thorn Edition," Kaylin stated flatly to Blake, her voice devoid of emotion. "That piece is for display," Blake scoffed, crossing his arms. "For serious buyers." Miles away in the secure, low-lit basement of a nondescript electronics repair shop, Colonel Marcus Thorne watched the scene unfold on a bank of monitors. At 50, Thorne was a man forged by decades of command. His hair was more salt than pepper, but his physique was still that of a soldier, and his eyes held the weary weight of too many battles. Beside him, Anya Sharma, a brilliant former NSA analyst in her early 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a perpetually focused demeanor, typed furiously. Thorne had pulled her from the brink of a career-ending scandal, and her loyalty to him was absolute. "Kaylin's camera feed is stable," Anya reported, her voice calm despite the tension. "But I'm detecting a weak signal scanner active inside the store. The enemy is present." Thorne's jaw tightened. On a large whiteboard behind them, a complex web of photos and connecting lines culminated in a single smiling portrait. Under Secretary of Defense Adrian Vance, Kaylin's uncle, the man who had sold out Thorne's unit, Ghost Cell, for political gain in a disastrous operation in the Middle East. Thorne was the sole survivor. The microdrive hidden inside that pistol was the only thing that could prove Adrian's treason. "She doesn't know it's her uncle, does she?" Anya asked softly. No. Thorne's voice was heavy gravel. She just knows she's retrieving evidence against a traitor. She doesn't need to carry that burden right now. This mission was more than justice. It was personal. He had sworn to protect Kaylin, the daughter of his fallen best friend. Now, to avenge his men, he had to send her into the lion's den to confront her own family's demon. If you don't want to make the sale, just say so. Kaylin's voice cut through the tense silence, sharp and cold as the autumn air outside. I'm sure Nighthawk's customer relations department would be fascinated to learn why a piece honoring a Marine legend is being handled by a disrespectful clerk. The threat, direct and professional, landed precisely where she intended. Blake's face flushed with anger, but before his ego could formulate a response, Silas glided smoothly between them. Come now, he said, his voice a calming baritone that was somehow more menacing than a shout. Let's all be reasonable. The young lady has shown a clear interest. Perhaps you should show her the firearm, son. After all, he added with a pointed look at Kaylin, I'd be quite keen to inspect it myself, once she is finished. It was a masterful move, a feigned act of mediation designed to keep the prize in play, pinning it to the counter while he stalled for time. The word stall echoed in Kaylin's mind as Thorne's voice crackled urgently in her earpiece. Alarm! Anya's detected a hack on the local cell tower. They're running a triangulation algorithm to pinpoint our command post. You have less than 10 minutes before our position is compromised. There was no more time for subtlety. This was now a race. I have to change the plan, Kaylin transmitted back in a subvocal whisper. I'm forcing his hand. She locked her gaze onto Blake, her emerald eyes now hard as flint. You think this is just a gun, don't you? She said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial level that drew everyone closer. The specifications list a standard G10 grip, but this one, she paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air, is 7.4 grams heavier. It's been reinforced with a dense polymer core to house a secret compartment. You didn't know that, did you? Or do you only know how to read the price tag? A collective intake of breath swept through the store. Dave, the owner, a stocky man in his late 50s with a neatly trimmed gray beard and the weary eyes of a retired Air Force logistician, took a step forward. He had built his business on discretion and professionalism, and this entire situation was setting off every alarm bell in his head. Silas's charming facade finally cracked, his eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second, a flicker of fury that Kaylin didn't miss. She had just publicly confirmed the existence of the compartment. She had exposed him. In the command basement, Anya's fingers flew across her keyboard. They're brute-forcing the encryption, she announced, her professional calm fraying at the edges. Colonel, they're good. Damn good. We have to wipe our servers and evacuate in 8 minutes, or they'll have us. Thorne closed his eyes, and the sterile basement dissolved into the blinding sun and choking dust of a Kandahar alleyway 10 years ago. Gunfire echoed off the mud brick walls. His team was pinned down, ambushed. Air support! Where is my air support, Adrian? He had screamed into his radio, his voice raw. Adrian, respond! Silence. Then a distorted voice, Adrian's voice, speaking in Russian to an unseen third party. The package is in the trap. Erase them all. The memory of that betrayal was a physical wound that had never healed. Thorne's eyes snapped open, the pain replaced by cold, hard resolve. He would not fail again. He would not lose another soldier to that man. Anya, prepare the reaction team, he commanded, his voice like iron. Send them the store's location. The authorization code is legacy. They will know what to do. Back at Valor Arms, Blake's humiliation had curdled into rage. He was trapped, exposed as an ignorant fool in front of his boss and customers. His ego had only one escape route: aggression. Words are cheap, he spat, his face red. You talk a big game, but can you back it up? The range. Let's go to the range. Prove you're worthy of even touching that weapon. It was exactly the opening Kaylin needed. It would isolate her, the gun, and her immediate threats from the public eye. Fine, she said, her voice a calm island in a sea of chaos. Let's go. The heavy soundproof door of the shooting range clicked shut with the finality of a vault. The enclosed space felt immediately claustrophobic, the air tasting of lead and solvent. Blake, trying to reclaim some semblance of authority, shoved a standard Glock 19 and a magazine into Kalen's hands. His voice was laced with scorn. "Mozambique drill. Let's see what you've got, Marine." Kalen took the weapon, her movements fluid and economical. She performed a quick press check, seated the magazine, and racked the slide with practiced efficiency. But her eyes weren't on the paper target 25 feet away. They were fixed on the small black dome of the security camera mounted in the upper corner of the room. A tiny, almost imperceptible red light glowed within. "Anya, are you ready?" she whispered, the words a silent breath. "Ready, Kalen. On your mark. 3, 2, 1, now." A faint, high-pitched whine, audible only to Kalen through her earpiece, signaled the activation of Anya's counter-surveillance program. The little red light on the camera flickered once, then died. 10 seconds of blindness for their enemies. It was all the time they needed. The main lights in the range buzzed and then extinguished, plunging the room into near total darkness. A heartbeat later, emergency backup lights kicked in, bathing everything in a hellish crimson glow. The heavy range door was thrown open. Silas stood there, no longer a charming collector, but a cold-blooded operator. A suppressed pistol held steady in his hand. He was flanked by 2 men who had materialized from the shadows of the store. One was a hulking brute with a shaved head and a neck as thick as a tree trunk. The other was lean and wiry, his darting eyes taking in the scene with the twitchy energy of a predator. Blake let out a high-pitched, terrified shriek. Kalen did not scream. She moved. Phut! Phut! 2 suppressed rounds from Silas's pistol tore through the space where she had been standing, but she was already dropping, twisting. Her own Glock came up, a seamless extension of her arm. Bang! Bang! The unsuppressed roar of her pistol was deafening in the confined space. 2 9mm rounds struck the hulking henchman square in the chest, the impacts throwing him back a step. Bang! The third shot, the head part of the drill, was executed perfectly. The big man crumpled to the ground without a sound. Simultaneously, Kalen kicked out, her combat boot connecting with the leg of the heavy ammunition table. It tipped over with a deafening crash, spilling brass casings across the concrete floor and creating a makeshift barricade. She dove behind it just as the second, wiry henchman opened fire, his shot sparking against the steel tabletop. In the command basement, the main monitor displaying Kalen's feed dissolved into a blizzard of static. "Signal lost!" Anya yelled, ripping off her headset. "They've either destroyed the camera or triggered a wide-spectrum jammer. She's blind and... there." Thorne didn't waste a second. He was already on his feet, strapping on his own tactical vest. He grabbed a radio handset from the console, his face a mask of cold fury. There was no trace of the weary commander, only the ghost of the operator he once was. "All legacy units, this is Spectre," he growled into the radio, his voice a low command that brooked no argument. "The package is compromised. I say again, the package is compromised. Execute protocol. Priority 1, Sergeant Vance. Go loud. I want that building secured in the next 90 seconds." Outside Valor Arms, parked in alleys and side streets, the side doors of 3 unassuming commercial vans slid open. 12 men, clad in black tactical gear, with no identifying insignia, emerged into the cool evening air. They were Thorne's ghosts, the quiet professionals and grizzled veterans of Ghost Cell and other units who owed him their lives. They moved with a silent, lethal efficiency that no police force could match. They were not here to make arrests. They were here to reclaim a legacy and to bring their own home. The firefight was a blur of crimson light and thunderous noise. Pinpoint muzzle flashes illuminated the chaos in strobing snapshots. The wiry henchman, overconfident, moved to flank Kalen's position. It was a textbook maneuver and a fatal mistake. Kalen, anticipating his move, fired 2 rounds through the thin steel of the table, her combat instincts calculating the angle perfectly. The man collapsed with a grunt of surprise. Now it was just her and Silas. He was different. He moved with a chilling economy of motion, a professional patiently dissecting his opponent's defenses. He methodically pinned her down, forcing her to expend ammunition while he advanced, closing the distance for a final, decisive shot. Just as Silas raised his pistol for the kill, the entire front of the store imploded. A storm of shattered glass and splintered wood erupted inwards as Thorne's legacy team burst through the windows and doors. They moved like wraiths, their black uniforms blending with the shadows. Silas was caught completely off guard. He barely had time to register the new threat before one of the operators tackled him, driving him to the floor with brutal efficiency. The resistance was over. When the main lights flickered back on, the scene was one of controlled carnage. Blake was huddled in a corner, sobbing hysterically. Dave, the owner, was being calmly debriefed by a massive operator with a Viking-like beard. Thorne strode through the wreckage to where Silas, whose real name was Croft, was being cuffed. "It's over, Croft," Thorne said, his voice flat. Croft spit a wad of blood onto the floor. "Vance will bury you all for this," he sneered. Thorne turned to Kaylin, his eyes scanning her for any injuries. "He doesn't know who you are." "Good." He then looked at Blake, his expression hardening. "Young man, you saw a world tonight that you were never meant to see. Forget it. Because if you don't, it will swallow you whole." 6 months later, the federal courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. On the television screen in Kaylin's quiet apartment, the verdict was being read. After reviewing the incontrovertible evidence of treason, espionage, and conspiracy to commit murder, the judge's voice boomed, this court sentences the defendant, Adrian Vance, to life in prison without the possibility of parole at a federal supermax facility. For the defendant, Silas Croft, on similar charges and domestic terrorism, the court imposes a sentence of 40 years. Kaylin clicked the TV off. The coffee table before her was covered with newspapers, all screaming headlines about the biggest political scandal in a decade. The doorbell rang. Thorne, now a civilian in a simple jacket and jeans, stood in the hallway. He held a familiar polished wooden box. Inside, the Nighthawk Custom Thorne edition rested on a bed of velvet, cleaned and restored. "It belongs to you," he said simply. "You earned it." Kaylin looked from the gun to Thorne, the man who had become a father to her. "His betrayal. It's always going to be a part of my story." "No." Thorne placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Adrian's betrayal is his legacy. Your courage, your integrity, your loyalty, that is your legacy. Never confuse the two." Kaylin nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. The battle was over. Justice had been served. The ghosts of the past were finally at rest. And she, Sergeant Kaylin Vance, was finally free to write her own story. In the end, Kaylin's story is a powerful reminder that true strength is not always what we see on the surface. It is the quiet courage, the unwavering integrity, and the fierce loyalty that define a person's character. Some might call the timing of Thorne's arrival a coincidence, but perhaps it was something more. It was a small miracle, a sign that God does not always send help in the form of angels with wings. Sometimes his work is done through dedicated people placed in the right place at the right time, armed with a God-given courage to face down evil. In our daily lives, we are constantly given the choice to see people as Blake did or to see them as Thorne did. We can judge by appearance, or we can look for the character within. We never truly know the silent battles others are fighting or the incredible strength they hold just beneath the surface. The greatest test of our faith is how we treat those the world so easily dismisses. What did you think about this story of justice and hidden strength? We would love to read your thoughts in the comments below. If this message resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they are stronger than they appear. And be sure to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Until next time, may God bless you and your loved ones, and may He grant you the wisdom to see the strength in others and the courage to find the hero within yourself.